Hello, I'm Marty Cox. This Part 2 video is filled with personal memories of Country Heights from years past, some dating back to the mid-50s when the subdivision only included a few homes. I hope you find the personal memories interesting. A big thank you goes out to each person who volunteered to share something special about this historic part of Mount Vernon.
I'm Gary Price. I grew up a couple of houses down the road from where we're standing now, and behind me where the daycare center is sitting was McPherson Field, baseball field, when I grew up here. Back behind the field was a home owned by Ralph McPherson, and he had a son named Tom. When I first moved out here in the 50s, he was diagnosed with an incurable cancer. Tom pretty much dedicated a lot of his free time to the kids in the neighborhood. He was a big brother to us, and he loved baseball. He went to the Little League field and measured the dimensions of the field and came out here and did an exact replica with a backstop and pitcher's mound, real bases, and a picket fence around the outfield. We used to like to keep track of our home runs just like the major leaguers did, and everybody had their count for the year. Since I lived in right field, I had a lot of balls deposited in my front yard by Randy Arnett and Greg Webb. And Greg reminded me the other day he hit the roof of my house once, which is a big shot. There was an elderly gentleman that come and watch us play sometimes, and I was batting. We were playing Indian ball one day. We didn't have enough for 9-on-9. And he stopped me from batting and wanted to show me a few pointers. He changed my stance and got my swing a little different, and I was hitting the ball with a lot better contact. When I came home, after we finished playing, my dad had been sitting in the front yard in a lawn chair, and he asked me if I knew who this gentleman was. And I said, well, it's a friend of Tom's, and he said, that was Ray Blades. He used to coach the St. Louis Cardinals and was a player for the St. Louis Cardinals during the World Series. And I was really honored to be able to have batting instructions by a guy like that lived locally in our neighborhood. Tom coached a Little League team, and he drafted just about the whole team was from this neighborhood, from Country Heights. I still have my old baseball hat. This is the Cardinal baseball hat that we all wore with pride. Everybody out here had a hat like this. We'd meet at the ball field before a game and do some batting practice and some catch, and we'd load up in Tom's 51 Chevy and go to the ball game. Then come back afterwards, and his mother, Brownie, would fix us milkshakes that we always look forward to. So really good time and really good memories. And when I think of my time here in Country Heights, this wonderful neighborhood, I always think of Tom McPherson. He was such a great mentor and role model for me.
Okay, tell me who we got here.
Donna Holtz, Courtney Simons, Barbara Swinnen.
Who were some of your childhood friends that you played with?
Lisa Swan, Donna Holtz, Barry Dalmasso taught me how to ride my bike backwards.
Oh, he did.
Yes, and he shot a possum in my garage.
Oh.
Well, Barry, we had some good years growing up here. A lot of stories. Most of them involved you getting somebody on the ground and working them over.
I'm still looking for Chris. Chris Cox.
Yeah, I told him he better not come back to Illinois because he's definitely on your list.
I heard he was in town last year and I didn't get
Yeah, he was.
Yeah.
He asked that I not call you.
Yeah, I'm sure he did. I imagine I should have whipped him that day he hit me with that golf club. He's probably a lot bigger than I am now. No, Chris, his brother, hit me in the head with a golf club driver one time out behind his house. Had to go to the hospital.
She was the fastest person. Yeah. Oh, I could never. And
She's heard that many times.
But that's my first recollection of Vicki. She just outrun all of us at West Salem School.
Well, let me tell you one of my first recollections of you.
Uh-oh.
You threw up all over your desk.
Oh my.
Oh man.
Way to go, John.
It was probably third grade.
I must have had a rough night.
Steve and Carl, can you come up with a memory of Country Heights you'd like to share? Anything that comes to mind when you think about living here?
Okay, one thing that comes to mind, I've been thinking about this. It's really a great place to grow up. I think about it back in the 1950s. Population boom. I mean, every house had 1, 2, 3 4, 5, 6 kids. Never had a problem finding someone playing baseball, basketball, fish. I mean, it was.
We had it all, didn't we?
Yeah.
We did.
Get on your bike and ride to the Little League field. People go here and watch the drive-in movie at night, whether you're supposed to or not.
There you go. Now, Steve, I know you moved in a little bit later, but what kind of memories do you have of our neighborhood?
I was only here for a couple of years before we moved to the east side of town. But yeah, I remember this thing because I just lived, just a half a block away.
Right.
Model rocketry was my hobby back then, so I used to come out here and launch my model rockets.
Got any good stories of growing up here in Country Heights?
Oh, lots.
Who are some of your best friends?
Oh gosh, Michelle McCole, who's no longer with us, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Stephanie Shields, April Britton, the Campbells, Tammy Corello.
Oh yeah.
Matt Heisey. A bunch of us that went to school together. And then Jason Hayes and, oh my gosh, I can't even remember everybody. But a lot of people that came. We played wiffle ball out here. And
oh yeah.
Climbed in, Bradford's. And used a lot of old TV antennas to climb up and in and out.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
I guess cable was coming in back then.
I see.
Everybody was getting rid of their TV antennas.
Over here, throwing it in.
Yes.
I see.
A lot
Okay.
of old swing sets ended up, I think, in here too, and it was all used to play around and with and
Right.
climb in and out. Played out here in the tree line, and then the other concrete building that was there. We
Right.
used that too. Played in that a lot.
Right.
Same thing. Had TV antennas to use as ladders.
Really?
Oh
okay.
yeah. We found lots of items back that we dig, and play, and it was all concrete structures that were kind of bulldozed down or whatever in the day, and we dig and just have the best adventures. We found old radios, we find old pots and pans. Yeah.
Really?
We found a knife where the blade had been broke off.
Okay.
We just had
Back in the day,
all
before
kinds of
everybody,
fun.
back in the day, before everybody sat in front of the computers, you had to make your own fun.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It was a good time.
It was a great neighborhood to grow up in. Yeah, it's a lot of time spent here and a ton of time spent at the rec club.
What do you think about when you think of Country Heights?
My memories is that Marty Cox taught me how to ride a bike backwards. And my family thinks I'm practically famous because I can do that. I still can.
Very good.
I'm Ron Brady. I live here at 321 Spruce. Lived here since 1970. When we moved in, this neighborhood was a pretty well established neighborhood of residents that had been here for quite a while. I have fond memories of when our children were growing up with all the neighborhood kids. They were just almost every other household had neighbors, and all the kids would play together. They'd go over to what they called the septic tank, and warning after warning, but that was their number one attraction, and they would go over there and play, and they would play out till the street lights came on. They knew it was time to come home.
Hi, I'm Jimmy Bradford, and I live at 316 Spruce, and we moved to this Country Heights area on Spruce Drive in 1964.
I'm Larry Goss. I lived in the home right there when I got married. That story's even more beautiful to me because I carried the newspapers as a kid in this neighborhood. And as I elevated to 16 years old, I found I could carry them from a car with my brother. We did that, and at one point, Dad acquired a 1960 Buick convertible, big, beautiful car. We'd fold the newspapers and throw them out of that convertible to all of the homes on our route. And by the way, that route started at 27th, went to the westernmost edge of Mount Vernon at that time. When I carried this location, just as I was 16 from a different vehicle, I came around the circle, brother was throwing newspapers, and there was a young girl pushing a tricycle across this circle to her home back here. I pulled right up by her and I stopped and I said, "You're a bit old to be riding a tricycle." And she barely answered. Later, her mother says, "Why don't you go out with that newspaper carrier?" And she said, "Oh, he's a smart aleck." And later, we met in school and married and have had 51 wonderful years, beginning our lives in that house right there.
I'm Sarah Dykes Snowden, and I believe I was the first person or child to live in Country Heights. When I was just a toddler, my parents bought a home on North 32nd Street and Southeast Crescent Drive, and it was one of two houses that had already been built in the neighborhood, and the Garrisons lived across the street, and LeBin Garrison was the developer for the neighborhood and built a lot of the homes. So from an early age, that's my memory of my earliest childhood, and I had a little sister, and when my brother came along several years later, we moved across the street, catty-cornered to 107 North 32nd Street. So I have lots of great memories of playing outdoors and sort of roaming around the country, which was all around us. It was just a few houses, and Ted Mannon lived just up the street a little bit very soon after I moved there, and he was one of my playmates. We'd explore around the neighborhood, free-range children, I guess. And then as the neighborhood grew, lots of kids were there, and at one time, I think I counted mentally, there were 50 or 60 kids living in that little block area around in that lower part of Country Heights. So lots of fun, no fences, everyone just ran around, the dogs ran around, we ran around, rode our bikes, and it just seemed like a great place to be, and a great place to be a kid growing up.
When someone mentions the word Country Heights, what comes to your mind, Alan?
I think I start thinking about
riding your bicycle backwards for hours around the block.
I don't. I think
Coincidence, you made your way back to Mount Vernon.
there was kind of a silent code of conduct, and I really think about that. She was younger, right? It was like you mess with one of us, you got to mess with all of us. That isn't written down anywhere, but everybody knew it.
Yep.
Everybody understood that. That was exclusive to our neighborhood. We didn't have that agreement with somebody else.
Absolutely.
We had a lot of things like that. Nobody wrote it down. We didn't lie. We didn't cheat. We didn't steal. We played fair and square. Somebody had to tell us, "Hey, play fair and square." We knew that.
Yep.
There was a code of conduct here. I didn't hear anything. We lived virtual reality. It wasn't something we held in our hands and stared at. We lived it.
I'm Brian Bruce. I used to live at 313 Cedar Drive. I just remember playing with all the kids around the area. We used to like to play Army quite a bit. And I remember coming to the rec club before it was built. There used to be a pond back here, and we'd go fishing and shooting frogs with our BB guns and all that. But I remember one story when we were playing Army. I was hiding in front of my house behind an evergreen tree near the corner of the house. And I was behind the evergreen tree, and I heard someone running up to the corner of the house, and it was Earl Koppel. And he looked around the edge of the house, and all I could see was his head. And all I had for a hand grenade was a tin can with gravel in it. I put too much gravel in it, and it was kind of heavy. So I flung it around the bush, and I hit him right square in the forehead. And it was so heavy, it about knocked him out. He come staggering out of the corner of the house. He was cussing, he yelled at me. And on the center of his forehead was a perfect red circle with the bottom of the can hit him just flush on. But we had some great times here, and I just remember all the people here, and glad I had the opportunity to grow up here.
Okay, this is Bob Fricks reporting. I'm not a true Country Heights persona of sorts, but I did grow up over the hill here in the Westwood area, and I spent a lot of time in the Country Heights area and accumulated a pretty good supply of stories. Some of those you can tell and some of those you can't tell, but a number of stories that I have involve this area right here, and Marty asked me if I wouldn't mind sharing them with you. Of course, the Recreation Club contains a lot of good memories because our family belonged there for several years. And obviously I have a lot of good memories of making my way over there and spending some time at the pool and whatever. But behind me here we have the what used to be the Starland Drive-In. You can still see the humps out there. Screen was over there in the southeast corner. Concession stand was kind of where that big clump of trees was located. And back in the day, all of this out in here was not really developed and always had a real good supply of rabbits. And my dad would always train his dogs through this area. And the rabbits would always try to run through the drive-in to try and throw the dogs off. And my dad then attached that name to his, made it his kennel name. His 3 field champions were Starland Pinky, Starland Chic, and Starland Susie. All of his dogs had the term Starland attached to it, which all goes back to the drive-in that sat here and the dogs running the rabbits through there and so forth and so on. I also have one of my earliest memories of movies comes from the Starland Drive-In when Mom and Dad took me to see Attack of the Crab Monsters. And I was so small, I recall that as I stood in the floor well of the back seat, I could barely see over the top of the seats in front. And that movie scared me so much that I recall even today, I went home that night and I actually pushed the dresser a couple of inches over, so the corner of the dresser set in front of the door to the closet, because I envisioned in my small mind these monsters coming out of the closet and attacking me at night. And I still have nightmares and flashbacks and so forth involving, I mean, I can still see these these claws all the time, and I always feel like, even today, I just feel like they're always around me, and I'm even getting that feeling now. It's almost like been a nightmare or
Bob, are these sea crabs or just
oh my gosh, crabs? No, there they are. There they are. They're after me again. They never leave me alone. It all started here at the Starland.
I'm Alan Jolly. My family and I moved to this residence on Spruce Drive, May 11th, 1957. We baby boomers who grew up in the 50s, 60s, and 70s sort of grew up with the neighborhood. And it was kind of exciting watching the homes being built while we were kids. A lot of fun things we did in the Country Heights. Spend time at Case's Pond. The snow cone truck coming by was always a fun time. Of course, the impromptu baseball game was always a lot of fun. But the most vivid memory I have is the December 18th, 1957 tornado. Although our home wasn't damaged bad, there was an element of fear in that time. But I must give my mom credit for keeping my brother Ron and me calm during the ordeal. She laid us in the down in the living room, which was on the east side of the house, and sort of got on top of us. But I remembered hearing the glass break in the west bedroom windows, and the door slammed shut, the TV tower coming down, and there was a couple of 2x4s that impaled the west bedroom wall. And we were fortunate to only be out of our house for a few days. But I must acknowledge my dad. Many of the photos that you see in this presentation were his. He always had a camera around his neck and took a lot of photos of us growing up and of the neighborhood. And I'm glad that my brother Ron and I could share these photos with you in this presentation. He had a true vision for preserving our memories.
When I was a little kid, I'm thinking 4 years old, 5 years old, we would drive past here on what's now Broadway, but at that time was way out in the country. It was Route 15 going towards St. Louis, and we would be going out to my aunt's place, which was way out in the country, about where Lowe's is now. And this area was the Camp Mount Vernon, the Army camp. And you looked at it, you looked way up on a hill away from the street to Camp Mount Vernon. I don't see the hill now. I think that was a figment of a childish view. Then after Camp Mount Vernon, the buildings were still here. They were the green, Army green buildings, and it was Legram City. And so I had no connection with Legram City. I just knew the name Legram City. And so one by one, LeBen started building the houses here, and it grew and grew until finally they added the north end of the area. It seemed like a long time. It was what, 4 years, something like that? It wasn't very long before it really developed into what it is now. But when it was Camp Mount Vernon, that was during the war, during World War II. And when a person my age says the war, they mean World War II. And there were a lot of soldiers in town because every family had somebody serving in the service. But in addition, all the soldiers who were camped here were in the town. You saw a lot of Army vehicles on all of the roads going in and out of Mount Vernon. It was just nothing uncommon at all to see big caravans of Army vehicles going down the roads. Yeah, they were going, I'm not sure of this, and as a kid I didn't know, but I think they were going to a camp in Kentucky, and that's why we saw so many of them going through Mount Vernon. I've been told that the USO had a, what would you call it, a place for the soldiers to meet in City Hall, and so the young women of the town would go in and meet with the soldiers there at the USO. A lot of this is hearsay to me.
Good morning from the beautiful Black Hills of South Dakota. Mike Mooney here. Marty and I grew up a few doors apart in Country Heights back in the 50s and the 60s. Some of my fondest memories were playing baseball across from Gary Price's house on the old McPherson property, basketball up behind where Marty lived in front of the old white barn. Never was very good at either one of those. Other memories, fishing at Case's Pond up north of the old chicken coop with Marty and Mark McGuire and a few of the others. And all in all, it was a good time to grow up back in Country Heights then.
Hello, name's Steve Martin. Grew up in Country Heights. Moved into the area probably June, July of 1956, early 57. And was there through the 1957 tornado, December 18th. Quite an experience. Had never seen one before. Was there in the house with my father and my sister. And I was not quite 5, my sister was not quite 2, so we were sitting there, and it was my grandfather's birthday that day, and he was in the TB sanitarium, so my mother and grandmother had gone to the TB san to see him. And while they were gone, Dad was home babysitting. We were there, if I remember right, everything was like mid to late afternoon, and started hailing. Well, we'd never seen hail before, so I opened up the front door and somewhat started running out. Dad came up and shut the door and says, "Dad," he says, "we can get some of that stuff later." He says, "Let's go do something else." So we went to the middle bedroom and had my sister with us, and he put her into the corner of the middle bedroom wall, put me over her, and then he got over us and he put on the record player. Played Three Blind Mice. I was like, wow, this is weird, but okay. And I remember looking down at my foot and looking back up, and what was there previously was no longer there. We were in the house for a minute and then we were gone. Don't really know where Dad and my sister went. I went to the southeast corner of the property, had boards and splinters and just all sorts of junk all over me and everything. Got up, kind of looked around, and nothing looked familiar because there wasn't anything left. We had floor tile. Next thing I know, Dad's out on the road in front of the house on Pine. Has my sister, and he's taking her down the street. There were several houses hit. And we went down to Bill and Kitty Mays' house. Their house was still intact. Later to find out that the tornado had actually picked it up, rotated it about 14 degrees, and then set it right back down. And so Dad took my sister down and then came back and grabbed me, and then we all ended up at Kitty's. About then, my mother and grandmother came up off of 34th Street and Central, and then tried to turn onto Pine and couldn't turn up the street. Mom gets out of the car and starts running up the street, power wires down all over the place. Grandma's still sitting in the car, and they're looking for us, and Dad sees her coming. And someone just walks out and says, "Hey, we're over here." And so we're in Kitty's house. My arm was, it was injured. It was pretty badly injured. And of course I couldn't see it because it was on the back side. Sister had scratches, and Dad was just covered in blood. And he had gotten a gash across the top of his head. Later we found out if it had been a quarter of an inch deeper, he might not have made it with us. But anyway, so waiting on ambulances and everything, it seemed like it took forever. Well, in the meantime, Dad said I can probably get there faster than what the ambulances could be, can get here. And so Dad got in the car, we got in the back with Grandma, Mom got in the front seat, and Dad drove to the hospital. And we got to the corner of 14th and 12th Street, right there where it Wise going to Good Sam. And at that time, was it called St. Mary's? I think it was called St. Mary's. And so we got there, and we got to the intersection. There's a cop standing out there directing traffic. Mom rolls down the window, says, "I've got injured in the car," and he flagged us on through, and we went to the hospital. Pulled up on the emergency entrance, and instantly they came out and they grabbed Dad and they grabbed me, and they wheeled us into the emergency. Was there for several days getting evaluated. They saved the arm. They said initially that I might have a 60% chance of not being able to use it, but the surgeon was from Benton and did really a fantastic job of it. It took several years to heal where I get the strength back in it and everything, but it did pretty much destroyed my arm at that time, but I was able to keep it. There were several other injuries that day. One death was a friend across the street, Brad Koppel. Brad and I had just played outside, I'd say more than a day before. It was a nice day and everything. Brad was a cool kid, we were all the same age. And never saw him again. Mark McGuire lived in the neighborhood also, he and his sister. And their house, I believe, was spared. And Mark is a few years older and kind of remembers a little bit more than I do. But these are the things that I just kind of, once they're ingrained in your mind, they're there. And this seemed to be what I remember about it. It was quite an experience.